Tavagatamritam tapta jivanam kaviviridinam kalmasapaham Shravanamangalam Shrivadatatam Bhuvivananti Bhuriyajana. Tavagatamritam, your words are like nectar, tapta jivanam, bringing life to scorched souls. Kavibhiri editam, praised by poets. Kalmashapaham, removing all sin. Shravana mangalam, auspicious to hear. Shrimad atatam, beautiful and exalted. Bhuvi garnantiye bhuridajanaha, those who will spread these words. In this case, the teachings, words of Sri Ramakrishna, are the most generous people in the world. Welcome everyone, and we are continuing from our reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Those who are following along in the book, we're on page 98. We got to the very end of chapter 2 last week, and I discovered that the very final few words of Sri Ramakrishna opened up an interesting and I think important new topic. So rather than finish it last time and start with chapter 3, I wanted to save that. So we'll start at the bottom of page 98, the very final section of the discussion that we have between Sri Ramakrishna, and it simply says one of the neighbors. This is March 11th, 1882. So the neighbor had asked, "You just referred to the instructions of the Guru. How shall we find him, Master? Anyone and everyone cannot be a Guru. A huge timber floats on the water and can carry animals as well. But a piece of worthless wood sinks if a man sits on it and drowns him. Therefore, in every age, God incarnates himself as the Guru to teach humanity. Satchidananda alone is the Guru." Then he continues, "What is knowledge? And what is the nature of this ego?" Then he quotes, "God alone is the doer and none else. That is knowledge. I am not the doer. I am a mere instrument in his hand. Therefore I say, O Mother, thou art the operator and I am the machine. Thou art the indweller and I am the house. Thou art the driver and I am the carriage. I move as thou movest me. I do as thou makest me do. I speak as thou makest me speak. Not I, but thou, but thou." Then it says, from Pran Krishna's house, the master went to Colonel Vishwanath, and from there to the lily cottage. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is quoting from a song by Ram Prasad, the great poet saint and worshipper of the Divine Mother. There's similar songs, Kamalakanta and others, that use almost the same language. That I'm a mere instrument, Mother, I do as you make me do. If you make me sing, I sing. You make me dance, I dance. And so Thakur would speak in this sense many, many times. And we get the impression that this is a teaching for us to follow. Well, otherwise, why would he say it so often? But it's a bit of a trap. We have to be very, very careful about this. Make sure we understand what the song means and what Thakur wants us to get from it. And this question of adhikara comes up again. Are we qualified to say that? And are we qualified to have that firm belief in our present condition, with our present sense of identification with the lower self and all these different things? Shokali tomari ichcha moye tara tumi, tomar kormo tumi koroma, loke bole koriyami. It's a very beautiful song, and just to make a wild guess, I would say if anybody knows one of the Ram Prasad songs, they know that song. And it was the first Bengali song that I ever learned. Of course, I don't sing it exactly, but I always liked it. Ponki bodo korokori, you keep the elephant mired in the mud. You help the lame person cross the mountains. Then it goes on that I am the room, you're the indweller, I am the machine, you're the operator, I am the chariot, you are the charioteer, I do as you make me do. So everything is your will, O Mother. We only think that we're doing things. You're actually doing everything through us. Now, what about this idea? Huh? And can we say it? Do we want to try to follow it? The very subtle question, this idea of agency and free will, and who is control, who is making decisions, who is responsible. There'll be so many discussions later about this, but I just wanted to very briefly talk a little bit about this idea of claiming that the Divine Mother is the one who is doing everything, or at least making us do things. It's a very beautiful idea, a very dangerous idea. And we find that in the history of many religions, that individuals and whole religions are justifying all of the things that they do by saying that this is the will of God. That don't think that this is just that I'm working on my own, I'm a free agent. That I'm an instrument in the hands of God. Therefore, there's a perfect justification. And in the history of the world, this justification has led to some very horrible things. It's led to this belief that people can invade other countries and they can convert people and they can even destroy civilizations. That we look at indigenous peoples of this country and other places, that there was some belief that people had some divine mission. So we have to analyze who can say this. We were reading from the great master not long ago. Now the one section, I've mentioned many times, the great master is really a companion to the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. There's a handbook that goes along with it. They really need to be read together because they complement each other. There'll be things in the gospel that we won't find there, things there that we won't find here. But there's a very long and interesting section on Sri Ramakrishna in the state of bhava. And this bhava, this condition that he was in, bhava mukha, they call it, after his 6 months in the nirvikalpa samadhi state. Now, Swami Sharadananda, he makes a very interesting point that after Thakur was in that state, and he even mentions that it wasn't immediately afterwards, that maybe within the next year, certain things started to become clear to him. What his mission in life was, who and what he had been in previous lifetimes. They call it jati smaranatva. And he says that this conviction came to Sri Ramakrishna after that he was a mere instrument in the hands of the Divine Mother. Now, if Sri Ramakrishna did not have that absolute conviction before that period, we have to ask ourselves, how can we have it now? If this was something that dawned on him. Now, we have two different schools of thought. One will say that the divine incarnation is always aware of his divinity, born with some knowledge of his mission in life. And the other is that he comes or she comes in a human body and mind and everything. And so these things have to be gradually understood, that there will be a little veil, a little dust of Maya. If there's no Maya in the mind of the avatar, then there can't be human embodiment. Thakur used to say that even gold needs a little bit of a base alloy if we want to turn it into any beautiful type of jewelry. Otherwise, it's too soft. We can't do anything with it. It's not usable for us. So, my understanding is that we have to reach a state where this ordinary ego is completely gone. Either we get established in this servant ego or child ego. If we're established in the servant ego, then maybe we can say that. But what does it mean to be inspired, to speak as God makes us speak? Yeah? This ordinary ego has to really be completely gone or completely transformed. Otherwise, we can make a mockery of this type of teaching. If somebody says, why did you do that? Don't ask me why. Who is the real doer? I'm not the doer. We read in the Gita constantly. And Thakur says, this is real knowledge. I'm not the karta. I'm not the doer. I'm not the agent of my action. Good. This is a very high ideal if we can possibly reach that. Now, I want to read something from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. This is in volume 7, Conversations and Dialogues. This was a conversation that Swamiji had with one, what was his name? Priyanath something. Priyanath. Bear with me. Priyanath Singha. Okay. Okay, Swamiji is saying that, all right, but you must take it, make it more comprehensive. Who is responsible for every action you do, every breath you take, and every thought you think? Isn't it you yourself? Now, not contradicting this other idea, he's looking at it from the other angle, from a very practical angle. The friend, yes and no. I cannot solve this clearly. The truth about it is that man is the instrument and the Lord is the agent. Okay, so this is what the parrot does. Huh? When he memorizes some little thing, where is the conviction? Who is this person to say something like that? But we also can do that. Yes, I read in the Gospel, Thakur says that it must be true, that I'm an instrument, that God is the real agent. It sounds very nice. So when I am directed by His will, I am not at all responsible for my actions. So this is the logical conclusion. And very often Thakur is asked that. As soon as people hear this, they say, then am I not responsible? Then I can do whatever I want? Then who is the one? Then why should any sin come to me? If I'm not the agent, then I'm not responsible, then I shouldn't get the karma for it. So this is the logical train of thought that goes on. Now, Swamiji makes a very important point here. What I was trying to make about when Thakur got this conviction, Swamiji says, well, that can be said only in the highest state of realization. This is a goal for us to be able to say that, and it can be an ideal for us. Whether it can be a spiritual attitude that we follow, that will depend very much on how introspective we are. If we want that as a spiritual attitude, we have to be like Girish. Huh? If we wanted a spiritual attitude, we have to ask ourselves every second, am I doing this because I feel that this is a divine will, or because I want to do it? This ego is there. Anyhow, Swamiji goes on. That can be said only in the highest state of realization, when the mind will be purified by work, and you will see that it is He. You will see. So we're not denying the truth of this, but a very high state. You will see that it is He who is causing all to work. Then only will you have a right to speak like that. Otherwise, it is all bosh and mere cant. So it's just big talk. Question. Why so? If one is truly convinced by reasoning that the Lord alone is causing all actions to be done? So, okay, well, I don't feel it yet, but it makes sense to me. If it makes sense through reasoning, then I should say it must be true. Swamiji, it may hold good when one has been so convinced, but it only lasts for that moment and not a whit afterwards. Well, consider this thoroughly, whether all that you do is in your everyday life. You are not doing with an egoistic idea that you yourself are the agent. How long do you remember that it is the Lord who is making you work? But then, by repeatedly analyzing like that, you will come to a state when the ego will vanish, and in its place the Lord will come in. This is the ultimate truth, that if this ego is false, if there's no substance to this ego, and we eliminate that, then there's nothing left. Who is the agent at that point? It has to be the Lord. But this is a far cry from our present understanding. Then you will be able to say with justice, Thou, Lord, art guiding all my actions from within. But, my friend, if the ego occupies all the space in your heart, where, forsooth, will there be room enough for the Lord to come in? Then the Lord is verily absent. Then we get the question. But it is He who is giving me the wicked impulse. So we're so intelligent that we understand that, I can't be the agent, I can't be responsible. So you blame me for this ego wanting me to do things that don't seem to be in accord with the will of God. Who's giving me this impulse? It must be God, right? Perfectly logical. Swamiji, no, by no means. It would be blaspheming the Lord to think in that way. He is not inciting you to evil action. So where is this that I am the instrument and he is the operator, she is the operator? The very high state. If one says the Lord is causing everything to be done and willfully persists in wrongdoing, it only brings ruin on him. That is the origin of self-deception. Don't you feel an elation after you have done a good deed? You then give yourself the credit of doing something good. You can't help it. It is very human. But how absurd to take the credit of doing the good act on oneself and lay the blame for the evil act on the Lord. It is a most dangerous idea. The effect of ill-digested Gita and Vedanta, and we can also say ill-digested understanding of this beautiful Ram Prasad song. Never hold that view. Rather say that he is causing the good work to be done while you are responsible for the evil action. Why not take it that way? That will bring on devotion and faith, and you will see His grace manifested at every step. The truth about it is that no one has created you. You have created yourself. This is discrimination. This is Vedanta. But one does not understand it before realization. So Swamiji goes on, therefore the aspirant should begin with the dualistic standpoint that the Lord is causing the good actions while He is doing the evil. If we want to have this idea, then it means that we have to take responsibility. So Swamiji goes on, but the point that I want to make is that this is possibly not even an ideal for us to follow in the early stages. This Gita, we have to put these ideas side by side. This idea, I am not the agent of action, and this idea that I have to do spiritual practice, I have to control the mind, everything's in my hands. That we have to feel that we're responsible for everything that we do. Now, this idea of free will, I don't want to go into it so deeply because it's very, very tricky. The degree to which the mind is free depends upon the maturity of the mind. And the degree to which it is not free depends upon the degree to which we're at the mercy of the lower mind and the passions and the desires and all of that. When Arjuna asks, why do we do things we shouldn't do? Sri Krishna doesn't say, I make you do it. Huh? He says, because you're filled with rajas, because of kama and krodha, and we can add all of the others, because anger and jealousy and lust and greed and desires and everything, the mind is filled with those things, so you do things even, things you shouldn't do even when you don't want to do them. I love that verse, this baladiva, anichan, as if you're forced by some outside force. So there's no freedom in that type of mind. That's the psychological determinism. But when we reach the point where we can analyze and say, yes, I see the mind, these desires are pushing me in that direction, but I say, no, I won't follow it. I know I have a higher standard, and I'll start to fight against that. Then this limited individual free will starts to take place, and we have to cling to that. We have to feel that we have the power to change. If the psychological determinism is absolute, then the samskaras will never change. They'll just reinforce themselves. We have an impulse to act in a certain way, and we do it. We act in that way, that impulse comes back again even stronger. and we never get out of that. So we have to feel that we have this power of nigraha. This nigraha. This is what Sri Krishna says. Yes, it's very hard to control the mind, but it can be done. And we have to practice dispassion and abhyasa yoga, vairagya, all of these things to do all of that. Okay, so I just wanted to give a little time to this because we'll read it so many times. And for Thakur, it was absolutely appropriate because there was nothing inside of him. There was no ego sense there other than, if the ego sense ever came, it was other than I am a child of the Divine Mother. I am an instrument in her hands. Otherwise, there was nothing. He used to say, you know, when you take a pumpkin and you cut it open, say when kids make a jack-o'-lantern, huh? And they have to scoop out. First thing you have to do is scoop out all of the seeds and all the flesh and everything that, I don't know what they call it, the little stringy things that are there, and perfectly clean and clear. Thakur used to say, when I look inside, it's like a pumpkin that's been cleaned out, like that. So no vestige of ego or desires or passions or anything like that. So there's not room for anything but the Divine Mother. If this feeling of I would come, sometimes he would say, I look within, sometimes I see there are two. I see the mother is there and the child, both are there. Other times I look within and I see mother alone is there. I don't find this ego anymore. So we can, I think I said enough about that. We can go now to the third chapter. This is the visit to Vidyasagar. Vidyasagar, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. We'll hear a little bit about him. He was possibly one of the best known figures in Bengal, at least, maybe throughout India, but definitely Bengal, definitely in Kolkata at that time. Maybe he and Keshav were the two. And if we look at the period before that, we have some great figures in Bengal. We'll say Ram Mohan Roy. And after that, the Tagores, Devendranath Tagore, and then of course Rabindranath after that, Keshav. There will be a handful. He'll belong to that class. He was so influential and so inspirational to so many people. He was a great reformist. He was one of the leaders of the movement to allow widows, especially child widows, to remarry. So very liberal in his outlook, and at the same time, he was an Orthodox Hindu in many ways, and Sanskrit scholar, Bengali scholar, wrote one of the most important grammars for Bengali. He was head of the Sanskrit department. So many things. Very, very important figure, but known mostly for his philanthropical works and his attitude. He was such a generous person. I don't know where all of his money came from, but he supported so many people, poor students and widows, and so he was a very important figure. And we know that Thakur always liked to visit people like this. He had this conviction, and we read again in Gita, another very well-known verse, that wherever one sees any special manifestation of anything, it can be musical skills, it can be oratorical skills, it can be scientific knowledge, wisdom, it can be anything, that we should understand there's a special manifestation of divine power within that person. So Thakur always wanted to visit whenever he heard about any of these great people, these great pundits, these great scholars, these great generous people like Vidyasagar. So this starts out April 5th, 1882. So this is, M started coming March, April, May, June, July. So it's still within 6 months of M coming. Now M, of course, had a long relationship with Vidyasagar because he taught in the school, Vidyasagar school. We'll get to that in a little bit. Swamiji himself, Narendra, was a student in his school when he was a young boy, 9 years old or something, this metropolitan school. That was also Vidyasagar. So he was well known as an educationalist also. But let me read, we start out with a little introduction about him. Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was born in the village of Bir Singh, not far from Kamarpukur. So they were kind of country people, countrymen. They had that in common, came from the same area. Sri Ramakrishna's birthplace. He was known as a great scholar, educator, writer, and philanthropist. One of the creators of modern Bengali. He was also very well versed in Sanskrit grammar and poetry. His generosity made his name a household word with his countrymen. Most of his income being given in charity to widows, orphans, indigent students, and other needy people. Nor was his compassion limited to human beings. He stopped drinking milk for years so that the calves should not be deprived of it, and he would not drive in a carriage for fear of causing discomfort to the horses. We can remember one incident when there were a lot of people going back in a horse carriage, and Thakur saw, and he looked at the horses and he said, will they be able to do it? Carry so many people, will it not cause the pain for the horses? So we see he had that same feeling. He was a man of indomitable spirit, which he showed when he gave up the lucrative position of principal of the Sanskrit College of Calcutta because of a disagreement with the authorities. It was, I don't remember exactly, some point of ethics. He felt that it was unethical for him to agree with what they were asking him. So he gave it up. His affection for his mother was especially deep. One day, in the absence of a ferry boat, he swam a raging river at the risk of his life to fulfill her wish that he should be present at his brother's wedding. His whole life was one of utter simplicity. The title, Vidyasagar, meaning ocean of learning, was given him in recognition of his vast erudition. Now, I just want to bring up another point, which to me is very interesting. M is writing all this. Now, these things are true. Almost anybody would have said the same thing and praised him to that extent. But M had his run-ins with Vidyasagar, and Swamiji also. Just to mention two little things, that this was during the period when Sri Ramakrishna was ill with his throat cancer at Kashipur, and M spent every spare second, if possible every day, he would go to Sri Ramakrishna and not only visit him, but find out what his health was like, even how much blood he had lost that day. He used to bleed from the sore in his throat. And he would take that information and go back and take it to Dr. Sharkar or whoever the doctor was at that time. So at the same time, he's trying to fulfill all of his duties as a teacher in the school and all of this. That one particular year or semester, whatever it was, the students got bad marks. This just, in general, they weren't up to the standard that they'd been earlier. And Vidyasagar made a comment. Whether he said it directly to him or it got back to him, I don't know, but he made some comment that because he's spending so much time with Sri Ramakrishna and not looking after his real duties at the school, that the result has been like this. And M, if we think that Vidyasagar was an ethical person, the M was far more. And as soon as M heard this, he quit. He gave up his job. He told Vidyasagar, then I won't work here anymore. Now, we know from Swamiji's attempt to get a job, Narendra, which I'll get to in a second, that it was very hard to find work at that time. That it was putting the whole family in jeopardy to give up a very good job at that time and then to try to do something else. So it was tremendously risky for him. But his feelings were hurt, and he felt it was for the good name of Sri Ramakrishna and everything, so he did it. So M had every reason not to be so praiseworthy towards Vidyasagar. Vidyasagar could have said, oh, I didn't mean it, it's okay, I overreacted, please stay on. He didn't. He accepted the resignation. Now, Swamiji, I mentioned, Narendra, as a young boy, he studied in the school for a couple of years or something. But after his father died, and the family was in terrible poverty, and Swamiji went from place to place to look for a job. The one job that he got was teaching in Vidyasagar's school. Now, I don't know for a fact, but it's probably quite likely that M helped arrange it. Whether M did it with Narendra's knowing or not, we can't say. But Thakur, much to the chagrin of Narendra, would tell the people, can you do something to help this boy? Now they're in poverty, you're all his friends. Can you help him find a job? Can you help give some money so that they have food? And Swamiji would be very annoyed and very embarrassed. And we know that M gave money to help Swamiji's mother in secret. He didn't want to shame Swamiji Narendra. He was very proud. He didn't want to beg from other people. And he knew that he wouldn't accept that money if he knew where it came from and everything. So this is this second relationship with Swamiji, that he became a student in the school. Now, what happened is not entirely clear, but probably out of some type of jealousy, that some of the other teachers made some comments about Narendra, and they weren't happy with him, and Vidyasagar fired him. So, second reason why Narendra could have held a grudge and why M could have held a grudge, but neither of them did. And they both recognized his greatness that way, and they were free from this type of reaction that most of us would have. Most of us would feel, okay, then I'll tell everybody what he did, and they didn't have that type of feeling at all. So there was tremendous respect for Vidyasagar, and just as Ramakrishna went to meet Devendranath Tagore and others, he would always, and Keshav Chandra Sen, he would always see if he could meet these people. Sometimes he would ask Mathur Babu, sometimes he would send his nephew Hridoy to go and meet this person. He would say, oh, this great Pandit is here, you go meet him, see if he has any egotism or not. If he's just a proud Pandit, then I won't bother, I won't waste my time. If he has a little bit of dispassion and a little bit of humility, then I'll be very pleased to meet him. So for someone of Thakur's stature in the spiritual realm, otherwise he was a poor simple priest, a village priest, but generally somebody of that stature would say, well, let them come to me. Huh? But Thakur, of course, was not like that. So he would always go to meet them. So, continuing reading, Sri Ramakrishna had long wanted to visit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, learning from M that he was a teacher at Vidyasagar school. So this is still 1882. It's not until 1885 that he gives up that position. The master asked, can you take me to Vidyasagar? I should like very much to see him. M told Ishwar Chandra of Sri Ramakrishna's wish. Now he was a little bit unorthodox in his standpoint, a little bit liberal and everything, but at the same time he was a religious person. He wasn't a real modern Western educated agnostic or anything like that. We'll hear about his views a little bit. I should like very much to see him. So the Pandit gladly agreed, that M should bring the master some Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. He only asked M what kind of Paramahamsa the master was. So M must have said that I visit this man, people call him a Paramahamsa. Paramahamsa had a very general meaning, a slightly specific meaning. There was some pradayas, some class of sadhus that by their dress and certain actions and things could be considered belonging to the Paramahamsa Sampradaya. We know that because Thakur met one sadhu once, I think it was in Surendra's house or something. He was sitting outside. He liked him very much, and he asked what Sampradaya, what order do you belong to? And he said, people call me a Paramahamsa. Yeah. Otherwise, it can just mean someone who has reached such a high state of spirituality that they don't care for any external signs. So he's asking, what type of Paramahamsa? Does he wear an ochre cloth? M answered, no, sir. He is an unusual person. He wears a red bordered cloth. Okay, this is associated with a householder, with a little bit of fashion. Not just a plain white cloth or, of course, garo cloth, but just as you would buy in the market. There's a little bit of a fashionable thing with a red border. And polished slippers. Not even just cheap sandals, polished slippers. And sadhu in those days generally would go barefoot. But Thakur, he was so sensitive, his skin was so sensitive that He couldn't bear the touch of things. His face was so sensitive. We wonder, why did he have a clipped beard? Generally, sadhu, either they won't shave at all, they have a long beard, or one tradition is once a month, full moon or new moon, whatever, they'll shave, and it'll go back and they'll shave. But he kept a short beard and short hair. So either you shave the head and beard, or you let it grow. But he had a barber who would come, just like ordinary people would get a haircut and trim the beard. So he didn't follow any of these rules. He didn't have to. But he did it because his skin was so sensitive. To shave every day would have been very difficult for him. Okay, so he wears a red bordered cloth and polished slippers. He lives in a room in Rani Rashmoni's temple garden. Everybody knew about the Dakshineshwar temple because it was such a huge thing when it came. It's a huge area, and so many sadhus would go past there and stay there. They fed so many people every day. Huge temple to Mother Kali, temple to Radha Krishna, and the 12 temples to Shiva. So everybody knew about it. In his room there is a couch with a mattress and mosquito net. All things that generally a sadhu won't have. He has no outer indication of holiness, but he doesn't know anything except God. Day and night he thinks of God alone. Now him also could have said he goes into samadhi day in and day out. He has ecstasy. He could have gone on and on, but he doesn't want to lay it on too thick. He wants it. I'll tell him enough so that he'll know this is a person of substance. That it'll be not just he'll be happy to meet you, you'll be happy to meet him. On the afternoon of August 5th, the master left Dakshineshwar in a hackney carriage, accompanied by Bhavanath M. and Hajra. Bhavanath, of course, the young disciple who was very close friend with Narendra, Swami Vivekananda, and Hajra, who was one of the temple workers, priests who stayed in Dakshineshwar from a nearby village. We see him, he plays a very interesting and significant role in this Leela in Dakshineshwar. Vidyasagar lived in Badur Bagan in central Calcutta, about 6 miles from Dakshineshwar. On the way, Sri Ramakrishna talked with his companions, but as the carriage neared Vidyasagar's house, his mood suddenly changed. Thakur, this happened on many occasions, that either before he met someone or on the way to meet someone, that he'll have some type of indication, he'll get into a certain type of mood. He'll reach the point where when he actually meets that person, he'll say, someone will give some description, he says, yes, I can see everything about him. I can look inside his soul the way we look inside a glass case and see the objects there. So Thakur would get into this mood. He was overpowered with divine ecstasy. Not noticing this, M pointed out the garden house where Raja Ram Mohan Roy had lived. I mentioned his name a little bit earlier. He was such an important figure. He was really the precursor to this whole Brahmo Samaj movement. That first him, then Debendranath, who really founded it, but he was the inspiration behind it. He was one of the first interested in reform, the issues of child marriage and remarriage of widows, all of these things. But he also wanted to reintroduce study of the Upanishads in Bengal, which wasn't there. It was very few people. Of course, they had great pundits in Bengal, especially this Navya Nyaya system. They were famous for that. It's not that there weren't great scholars and pundits and everything, but in general, two things weren't very prominent there. One was that this people having any familiarity with the Upanishads, and second was that there wasn't much of an understanding even of the traditional sannyas system. So, and we learn this when these young boys first take sannyasa and they go begging, and it seems as if many people didn't even know sannyasa has come to the door, you should give food and everything. They were accused of being thieves, this and that. So the Shankaracharya Dashanami sampradayas weren't very well known at that time. So normally we would think that Thakur would say, this is the house of Ram Mohan Roy, and he would salute and everything, but he's in a different mood now. So the master was annoyed, and so we think, is it possible for an avatar to get annoyed? Huh? Birokto haya. We find this phrase very often there. Yeah, why not? He has this human mind. Sometimes he could get angry. Sometimes we see some of the sadhus that we love and respect and revere the most. There's flashes of terrible anger. We look at Swamiji, but it's different. It's not based on any personal things, ego things, and it doesn't last at all. It's just, it takes the form of anger. This line on water, something like that. So annoyed, not really upset or angry, but really as if to say, before you say something, look, at least see if I'm in my normal state of consciousness. So the master was annoyed and said, I don't care about such things now. He was going into an ecstatic state. The carriage stopped in front of Vidyasagar's house. The master alighted, supported by M. When Thakur got into this ecstatic state, sometimes he could reel, sometimes he would walk like a drunkard, and sometimes he could fall down. We have two very important and well-known instances where he fell down. One was when he chipped his tooth, and the other was when he broke his arm, because there was no one with him at that time. This is why he always wanted to have someone to stay by his side. Why he wanted Babu Ram to stay there, or Latu, or Rakal, not just for the companionship and because he wanted to help mold their minds and train them, but it was dangerous for him. If at any time he could go into that mood and he could just fall over. And so we saw that, and he had a compound fracture. It wasn't a simple break. That bone actually stuck out, very, very painful. And what could they do at that time? They didn't know what to do. There was no surgery or anything. They would wrap it in cotton and put it into some type of cast thing. It was very, very painful for him. So M was supporting him. Thakur went through different phases in his life. We know at one time that no one could touch him in that state. He became so sensitive. The only one that he would allow, the one that he wanted, was Babu Ram, Swami Premananda. That Thakur felt that of all his disciples, more than Rakal, more than Narendra, more than any of them, that he had that purity of heart. The purity was very bones. This was Swami Premananda, later Babu Ram. But here, M is holding him. The master alighted, supported by M, who then led the way. In the courtyard, because M had been in his house many times, they had a friendly relationship also, not just that he worked under him. In the courtyard were many flowering plants. As the master walked to the house, he asked to M, like a child, pointing to his shirt button. My shirt is unbuttoned. Now, Thakur wore a shirt sometimes, only if, generally if it was a little bit cold, he was afraid of getting sick or something like that. Most of the time when it was very hot, we know that most of the pictures we see he has no shirt on. But other times we see he has a shirt, and sometimes he has a wrapper, and sometimes he has this little jacket that he used to wear. So he didn't care about any of these things. But he knew that other people could get offended. A Shobhota, the Bengali, they use this term, a Sabhyata, that will consider to be ungentlemanly, if I'm not well dressed. We know this also when he went to see Devendranath Tagore. That Tagore invited him to a festival, Brahmo Samaj festival, but then said, please, when you come, please dress a little more nicely, wear a shirt, something like that. So he gave a very funny reason, which sounds like a bit of a phony reason. He said, I don't want to hear that people criticized you. It'll hurt me very much if they criticized you. So please wear a shirt so that won't happen. Turned out really he just didn't want him, that he would have been embarrassed if he showed up that way. So Thakur said, who knows what mood the Divine Mother will put me in at that time. I can't promise anything like that. So Rabindranath said, okay, very good. And then the next day a letter came disinviting him. And then perhaps better you don't come, something like that. So Thakur knew that he was out of his element, that now he's a village boy, now he's in the society and they care about these things. Is your button buttoned? That I should probably button the top button, otherwise what will people think? They'll say, oh, he represents the Ramakrishna order, he's not all spick and span and all of that. He thought it was all silly, but yet he recognized that he didn't want to embarrass people and create a bad impression. So he asked, my shirt is unbuttoned, will that offend Vidyasagar? Oh no, said M. Don't be anxious about it. Nothing about you will be offensive. You don't have to button your shirt. He accepted the assurance simply like a child. Vidyasagar was about 62 years old, 16 or 17 years older than the master. So Sri Ramakrishna is going to somebody who has had a whole lifetime, a whole career of doing all of this good work. He lived in a two-story house built in the English fashion, with lawns on all sides and surrounded by a high wall. After climbing the stairs to the second floor, Sri Ramakrishna and his devotees entered a room, at the far end of which Vidyasagar was seated facing them with a table in front of him. So this is a Western style, to have a table and chairs and everything. The very typical Bengali style house. People would sit on the floor, or there would be cushions that you could put out. They would spread a mat, different things like that. To the right of the table was a bench. Some friends of their host occupied chairs on the other two sides. So possibly he invited some people that he thought would be happy to meet Sri Ramakrishna. Not that people didn't know, not that he was just unknown. So sometimes Hridoy would go and say, oh, my uncle, he's a great lover of God, that's all. Wouldn't even mention his name. We have to remember that this is well after Keshav had written up all these things in their magazine about Sri Ramakrishna. So it's not that he was an unknown person. So Vidyasagar probably thought that, oh yes, I've heard that name. I don't know much about him, what type of Paramahamsa. He wasn't a Brahmo. He wasn't a member of the Brahmo Samaj, although he shared some of the same views about reform. But then probably thought, oh, I have some friends who probably also have heard of him, would like to meet him. Vidyasagar rose to receive the master. Okay, he rose. He didn't make pranam or anything. Of course, he's much older, so that is also part of it, and he doesn't really know who he is. Sri Ramakrishna stood in front of the bench with one hand resting on the table. Remember, he's in some type of ecstatic mood. He gazed at Vidyasagar as if they had known each other before and smiled in an ecstatic mood. In that mood, he remained standing a few minutes. Now and then, to bring his mind back to normal consciousness, he said, I shall have a drink of water. This is a very common thing. I'll eat something, I'll have a drink of water. I'll have a smoke, fix the hookah for me. I'll have a smoke. He would say different things like that to try to bring the mind back down. This is many years after his Nirvikalpa Samadhi, 6 months, but we read in the Great Master that after that period, it wasn't just with great difficulty he could bring the mind down. Most of the time, if there was no one around, he would go into that state of Samadhi. And it was really difficult and almost painful for him to bring the mind down. This is many years after that, when he was more accustomed to having people around, and perhaps had a greater ability to go back and forth, and would constantly pray to the Divine Mother, Mother, don't give me Brahma Jnana, don't let me lose consciousness. So he was more accustomed to keeping the mind on a lower plane. But at one point it was really the rarity for his mind to be down on the ordinary plane of consciousness, not our ordinary, his ordinary plane of consciousness, and the most of the time it would just be floating somewhere in this divine realm. In the meantime, the young members of the household and a few friends and relatives of Vidyasagar had gathered around. Sri Ramakrishna, still in an ecstatic mood, sat on the bench. A young man, 17 or 18 years old, who had come to Vidyasagar to seek financial help for his education, was seated there. He would sit there and petitioners would come. The students or widows or maybe the child on behalf of his mother would come and they would plead their case. And he would either, I don't know how he did it, if he would give money on the spot, or he would say, yes, I'll arrange something, or I'll give you free boarding in my school. Many would come for things like that. So it's not uncommon that there would be a number of people waiting to talk to him. So seeking financial help for his education. The master sat down at a little distance from the boy, saying in an abstracted mood, "Mother, this boy is very much attached to the world." So seeing from that standpoint of bhava, of ecstasy, he could see just by looking and by observing that what state of mind this boy had. He belongs to thy realm of ignorance. So this avidyamaya realm. Vidyasagar told someone to bring water and asked M whether the master would like some sweetmeats also. Since M did not object, Vidyasagar himself went eagerly to the inner apartment and brought the sweets. Even in Vidyasagar's house there was an inner apartment. This was so common in those days, the place where the women would stay. The women wouldn't come and sit with the men at that time to see Sri Ramakrishna. If they wanted to see him, he himself would go into the inner apartments. This is where no strange man would go. But because he was a sadhu and considered a holy man and a saint, he would be allowed to do that. They were placed before the master. Bhavanat and Hazra also received their share. When they were offered to M, Vidyasagar said, "Oh, he is like one of the family. We needn't worry about him." So not that he doesn't want to offer it to M, he's trying to show the closeness of their relationship. Referring to a young devotee, the master said to Vidyasagar, "He is a nice young man and is sound at the core. He is like the river Falgu. The surface is covered with sand, but if you dig a little, you will find water flowing underneath." We don't know exactly who the master is speaking about here. It doesn't say. After taking some of the sweets, the master with a smile began to speak to Vidyasagar. Meanwhile, the room had become filled with people. So this was an event. There weren't entertainment things to be done at that time. It's not that people would go to the movies and the theater was there, of course, but this was one of the things. If people wanted to gather together and have something event, they would invite a holy person or someone who would recite from the scriptures, something like that. So now the room was filled with devotees. Some were standing and others were seated. Master, now we'll see how Thakur could charm people. For anybody else's mouth it would sound like flattery, but he had this ability to charm people and in very sweet and clever language with a lot of puns and things like that. Today at last I have come to the ocean. Vidya Sagar. It means the ocean of wisdom. Up till now I've only seen canals, marshes, or a river at the most. But today I'm face to face with the Sagar, the ocean, all left. Vidyasagar smiling. Then please take home some salt water. Now they're going to go back and forth. This is banter. Who can be the more humorous? Master, oh no, why salt water? You aren't the ocean of ignorance. You were the ocean of Vidyasagar, knowledge. You were the ocean of condensed milk, kheer, Vidyasagar. Well, you may put it that way. So they're both showing their humility. The Pandit became silent. Sri Ramakrishna said, they used to call him Pandit, Ishwar Vidyasagar. Sri Ramakrishna said, your activities are inspired by sattva. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he very often could praise people, and at the same time, he could tweak things a little bit. He would never hesitate to praise someone for their good qualities, and he would never hesitate in a very sweet, nice way, usually. Sometimes in a harsh way. if it was a very close devotee, but usually in a very soft manner, to try to do something that would make their spiritual mood, attitude a little more mature and more helpful. So we're starting out with a very positive thing. Your activities are inspired by sattva. So sattva here, it means kindness, it means goodness. That you're doing everything out of the goodness of your heart, you're doing it for a noble purpose, that all of the things you're doing are to remove poverty and the pain of loneliness and lack of education. They're all good things. Thakur always said that. The work that Vidyasagar does is all good. It's all based on sattva. But he also didn't fail to see what was lacking in the life of Vidyasagar, or what could be added to it. Though they are rajasic. Now, why is it rajasic? Rajasic because it's activity. It doesn't mean in a bad way that it's based on any anger or jealousy or hatred, anything like that. It simply means that there's some desire to do something. Rajas can be restlessness. It can also just be activity. This pravritti. This is the sign of rajas. Pravritti, this endeavor to do something, to get something done, to accomplish something. So that's the rajasic element. Though they are rajasic, they are influenced by sattva. So there's sattva that is tamasic in nature. That's when we're very actively engaged in doing something harmful. And then there's sattva, there's rajas that's sattvic in nature, where we're doing something good. Though work for the good of others belongs to rajas, yet this rajas has sattva for its basis and is not harmful. Shuka and other sages cherished compassion in their minds to give people religious instruction, to teach them about God. This was also the rajas of Sri Ramakrishna. Did he not have any rajas? He had to. Otherwise, he would have just remained in that exalted state the whole time. No, he purposely kept his mind down because he knew that he was born for a certain mission in life. And he had to inspire Swamiji and others to fulfill that mission and to spread these teachings, because he knew that society needed these things. So the avatar has to have a little rajas, because they have a mission. They have something to accomplish in life. But purely sattvic, that's the important distinction. Shuka and other sages cherish compassion in their minds to give people religious instructions, to teach them about God. You are distributing food and learning. That is good too. If these activities are done in a selfless spirit, they lead to God. But most people work for fame or to acquire merit. This really wasn't the case with Vidyasagar. He really, from all that we know about him, seems to have been a very sincere person. Their activities are not selfless. Besides, you are already a siddha. And now we'll get more puns here. How is that, sir? Siddha means a person of attainment, someone who's accomplished something, someone who is perfect. Siddha can mean a power. Siddha can mean boiled in Bengali. If you boil the potato, it becomes siddha. It becomes soft. So how is that, sir? Master laughing. When potatoes and other vegetables are well cooked, they become soft and tender. And you possess such a tender nature. You were so compassionate. Laughter. Vidyasagar. But when the paste of kalai pulse is boiled, type of dal, it becomes all the harder. Master, but you don't belong to that class. Mere pundits are like diseased fruit that become hard and will not ripen at all. Such fruit has neither the freshness of green fruit nor the flavor of ripe. Vultures soar very high in the sky, but their eyes are fixed on rotten carrion on the ground. The book-learned are reputed to be wise, but they are attached to lust and gold. Like the vultures, they are in search of carrion. They are attached to the world of ignorance. Compassion, love of God, and renunciation are the glories of true knowledge. Vidyasagar listened to these words in silence. The others too gazed at the master and were attentive to every word he said. So we will stop here and continue next time, page 101. And now we'll do the closing chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Bhaturavikraham Vai Yeshavataram Paramesham Hidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha.